So I just wanted to start with a big, big thank you. None of us planned for, signed up for schooling, living, loving, learning during a global pandemic. And to think about how this community has come together so quickly to not only create a completely new school, but been able to maintain our ties and our connections with one another and our sense of community, which is a thing that makes Gordon so very special, has really inspired me, moved me, motivated me when I couldn't, when I didn't think I was could keep going. All of you out there have done that, and so this is just a huge thank you for hanging in when it was tough. Thank you for the feedback and pushback, and thank you for the encouragement and love. It's one of the reasons why I think we've been able to enter into this reopening process with such optimism because we know that our community is behind us, and you have not hesitated to let us know that along the way. So thank you. So our agenda for this evening, we should be together for about 90 minutes. I'm going to go over some ground rules just so you know how we'll be interacting tonight. I'm going to be going over the planning process for reopening for the fall, the teams that are doing that work, and the working groups, timelines, etc. I'll break for a Q&A. Then I'll share survey data and some of the likely modifications that we'll have for the fall. Another Q&A. And then I'll talk a bit about financial viability, and one more Q&A, just so we're sure that we get everything in tonight. And if not, you always know that we're always available to answer any questions that you may have. All right, so our ground rules for tonight, or just, we don't have to call them rules, but more like how things will work. You'll see that you're all on mute, which is very strange. I'm sitting in my bedroom and it's silent, and not having kind of the interaction of all of you is strange, but it works so that everyone can hear. There's no background noise or distractions interrupting folks' ability to hear the information. If you do have a question as I'm going through, please put it in the chat as soon as you have it. Don't wait for me to say now for the Q&A. Because Claire Blackmer is going to be checking the chat. Tom Chicatello is here as well to monitor that. So Claire will choose questions for me to answer to the group. If there are questions that can be answered in the chat, Tom and Claire will be on that as well. I know it doesn't make any sense. Please avoid chatting in the chat. All that means is that I know that many of you have not seen each other for a while, and saying hellos and love to see you, or the dog's there and you want to recognize the dog, or a cute baby is there. It just is going to clog up the chat. And as much as folks try to do it privately, more times than not, that ends up with everyone. So you want to be careful in that respect. But if you are having a technical issue, please go ahead and put that in the chat as well, and we'll try to help you out as best you can, as best we can. Marlon Henry is here for that. Okay, I'm going to jump right in and talk about our planning for reopening. So one of the important things, I'm an English major, language is really important to me. And so we've called our planning not reopening planning, but futures planning. And that's a very specific word. And it comes from work that's been done at the Stanford University Institute for Design. And what this means is futures thinking is a leadership skill, allows us to navigate ambiguity and tap into imagination in order to bring about the preferred future we would like to bring to life, and mitigate the future we would like to avoid. We can't control the future, but we don't have to passively receive it. And the reason that we've been inspired by futures thinking or futures planning is because we really do, as hard as this time has been, don't want to miss an opportunity for us to think about what Gordon's future could be based on what we've learned from something we totally didn't expect. And that is anxiety producing work, but ultimately, and because of who and what this community is, I'm excited for what it could mean for the work ahead. And so I'll talk a little bit more about futures planning in the presentation, but wanted to set a context for you that I think is important. So there are 3 stages of this process: planning, preparation, and operation. And I'll talk about the timelines for those in a bit. But the planning piece is what I'm going to talk to you about today. So our priorities for this process. One is our student and community health and well-being. When I was talking to our assistant head of school, Lynn Bowman, about starting this planning process, one of the things I said to her is, at the end of all of this, and if anyone asks what Gordon is most proud of how we navigated and came through this crisis, the thing that I said to her was, I want it to be remembered and known, and us to be proud of the fact that we took care of our people. And this is a moment for care, it is a moment for compassion, it's a moment for connection in our world and through this process as well. And so that will always be our number 1 priority, taking care of each other. And it's an important thrust of the planning process. We also want to make sure that we're working towards a substantive and high quality educational program. I am so proud of our teachers, our faculty and staff, able to create a new school in 2 weeks. It's incredible. And we have an opportunity to look at what we've done well, what we want to do better and need to do better, and think about what the possibilities are, even if we are 100% on campus throughout the entire year. There's so much we can learn from and grow into in our educational program, and that's exciting as well. And 3 is the long-term viability of the school. Gordon needs to remain strong through this crisis, after this crisis, 10, 20, 40, 50 years after. And decisions that we make now can determine that long-term viability. So we want to make sure we're being smart and thoughtful. So I just want to make this abundantly clear about what our intention is in terms of return. We are committed to and planning for a return to an in-person, on-campus program this fall. Whether we're able to return to normal operations, and I'm defining normal operations as what we left in March, or a modified program, which I believe it will be modified. But it will be dependent on public health and government guidelines, scientific data, research, guidance from medical professionals, including our consulting physician, other experts in the field. But we are planning on being on campus, in person, and all together this fall. The only thing that would stop us would be a stay-at-home mandate from the governor. Crossing our fingers and hoping that that won't be the case. So the planning. So it's important for us that we reestablish a reopening plan, having a reopening committee and working groups. So our future steering committee, which is really driving and organizing this process, is me, our assistant head, Lynn Bowman, our CFO, Tom Ciccatello, our director of admissions, Veronica Jutras, our director of after school and summer programs, Jenny Alario, the assistant to the head of school, Claire Blackmer, and our AUX consultants. And I wrote about AUX in the letter that went out today. And just letting you know again that this is a group that we have been working with, I believe, for the past almost a month, maybe. But we contracted with them really to help us organize our work, advise us on what's going on locally, nationally, internationally, and helping us on a project management basis, make sure that we're organized, that our timing is correct for the things that we need to do, and giving us advice in the areas of our educational program, campus operations, health, safety, and wellness, and business continuity. She's going to kill me for putting her picture up like this, but I think she just deserves all of the credit and praise for her support. Dr. Jen Friedman, who would much rather, I'm sure, be known just as mom to Zach and Elise, but really want to, number one, just thank her for being with us and advising us since all of this started back in February. And also just being a steady and guiding and thoughtful, reasoned resource for us as we manage through our current situation and the work that we need to do for reopening in the fall. So I just wanted to go through quickly the working group so you could see folks who are working on it and the kinds of things that they'll be looking at. Our educational program working groups led by our assistant head of school, Lynn Bowman. We have our chairs from the education committee, our division heads, technology director, visual and performing arts director, faculty from each division, and parents who are also on that on the education committee. The kinds of things that they are working on right now, will continue to work on, are all areas of our program, from what's happening in the classroom, athletics, student life, extracurriculars, auxiliary programs, events and gatherings that we're having on campus. Our other working group, second working group, is campus operations and logistics. Tom is leading that group. I'm on that working group. Joe Almeida, our nurse Sandy Horton, Alexis Thompson, who's chair of our buildings and grounds group, and getting support in our buildings and grounds committee of the board. This group is looking at, obviously, our facilities, cleaning and janitorial services, food service, transportation, including arrival and dismissal, mail services. I'm sure you're all curious about that. Security, which will be important if we're looking at using different entry points into the school, egress points. We'll need to make sure our security measures account for that new practice. Another working group is health, safety, and wellness. I'm facilitating that group. Tom is on that group. Sorry about the bullet point there. Nurse Sandy is on that group as well. Joe Almeida has been moved just to campus operations. Dr. Friedman is with us there, and Lisa Vera Weiss is a parent who has worked in the governor's office and is now moved to the private sector and will be, I think, an incredible resource to us as we continue our planning process. Health and wellness, looking at pre-certification and screening. Pre-certification really means just being aware of anything that we may need to show or demonstrate to the state to be able to reopen. Testing, monitoring, tracing. We need to understand what's going to be required of us and how we can, or should we, kind of manage all of that. Patient care means thinking about where folks in the building may go or be if they get sick and what our protocols are around that. PPE requirements are going to be important for us to consider. And we have health, safety, and wellness for a reason. We need to think about mental health services and making sure we're taking care of our community in that respect. And also thinking about health and hygiene and distancing, which will probably be a part of our reality in the fall, and making sure our protocols are clear and that everyone that needs to be trained, students, faculty and staff, and parents, there's a plan for that as well. Business continuity, that conversation is happening in many different places right now. Bi-monthly meetings with me, Tom, our board chair, Amanda Regal, and our treasurer, Marion Monty, our finance committee of the board, our board of trustees. And Tom has worked on financial models for us to test different scenarios so that we can plan for different contingencies moving forward. So we could look at changes in our enrollment and see how that might impact our model, and that could go up or down, as an example. This group will be considering finances, obviously. Personnel will sit with this group, information technology, professional guidance, consultants that we may want to reach out to and help support our work. Admissions and advancement are important things to think about during this as they impact. Those are the huge revenue drivers of any school, in making sure that our new SAIA EXO, Claire Phipps, who may be at the town hall tonight. She is. Great. Claire, was so happy you're here. Will be joining us on July 1 and will, of course, be an important part of this conversation as well. Communications is also going to be important and already is. I can't thank Jeff Griffin enough for his partnership since we were, writing messages to you from a bus in Georgia and in Alabama to now being a real partner to me in communicating with the community. And that work will continue and deepen and be ever more important as we continue this work. As you can see, all of the different things that we have to think about. And we're also supported by Regan Communications, who works with us on public relations and crisis communications. And they've been wonderful as well. So in terms of a timeline, we see this planning process right now, meaning that the steering committee, the working groups are doing research, testing scenarios, doing walkthroughs of our building, of our campus, testing financial models and assumptions. So that work will continue throughout the month of June. And our plan is to come back to you no later than June 30th with an initial plan of what you can expect when you come back on campus. There's more work that has to be done with preparation. There may be things that change or shift. A lot of the things that we send you about schedules and class lists usually go out later in the summer. I do not see that changing, but you will know if there are significant changes in program or schedule before you come back with good time to plan, ask questions, and understand more. So our hope is to have some significant information to you about our plan for the fall. No later, as I said, June 30th, spend July and in August planning, coming back to do a lot of the work to prepare in August so that we can run operations on campus when we return. So I'm going to pause there and just ask Claire if there are any questions right now.
There are no questions in the chat at this moment.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to keep moving. So I said that I'd come back to this idea of futures thinking, which comes again out of Stanford's Institute for Design. And we have leadership team members and faculty members actually attending a virtual institute with Stanford to dig more into this work as we think about our educational program specifically, because I think that's the place where we have the most opportunity for innovation and don't want to pass it up. So having kind of training from a leading institution in this country around that is exciting. And it's something that we would not have had access to during the school year to be able to attend. So the thing about futures thinking that I think is particularly relevant to thinking about educational innovation and how I think it works well for Gordon is because Gordon is a community that depends on and thrives on a process and collaboration. And if you think about our strategic visioning work that we did together last year, a lot of schools, that work happens in the boardroom, and a strategic plan comes out magically out of that room and is presented to the community. Ours was really intentionally designed to be an inclusive process. And I think in an understandable rush to get information out to the community, some schools are, again, taking that top-down approach. And it may work for them and their culture and their needs. So I'm not knocking that. I'm just making a point that Gordon works differently, and our process is important to us. The collaboration is important. Your input is important. It's why, unfortunately, we have made you take several surveys. It's why we were asking when we started out this program, we had a process for checking in with you every week. It's why we've tried to interview every single family in this school, because it really helps us to center ourselves around what our community needs. And so futures thinking really aligns with that because, as you see, it puts people in the center of the design process and embraces the ways that we can think outside the box and control our future rather than having the circumstances of our future control us. And a big part of that is understanding how people are feeling about the future, the perspectives, assumptions that are shaping that. That also helps bring to the surface our own biases, and it helps us as all the people who are working on this planning process understand where those attitudes and emotions are coming from, which is really important, I think, a place for a leadership team for a school to operate. So getting into the survey data, that was where we dug into those assumptions, attitudes, emotions. I wanted to just share with you. We had an outstanding response. I don't think any researcher in the world has had over 90% response rate. But we had more representation than we have students, and I just think that you all were so enthusiastic about responding that it wasn't just one adult in the house. It was both of them who wanted to take the survey on their own, which is fine. All the information that we got was really helpful and useful. We asked a question about comfort sending children back to campus, and as you can see, from moderately comfortable, 30%, to very comfortable, 38%. Already folks are comfortable thinking about having their children back on Gordon's campus in the fall. And you see there is there's a chunk to look at as too early to say, and that came up in our interviews as well, that people trust, you all trust us to do our due diligence and the work necessary to bring your children back to campus safely. And we do not take that trust lightly. And folks were saying, I still have to keep an eye on this. And we understand that hesitation, particularly those of you who have people in your house, as I do, who are immunocompromised, your children are, or someone, or you have multiple folks in your house that you need to be careful about. So we know that this could shift. And we know that we need to account for that there could be a rise in folks who are saying, we love Gordon and appreciate everything that you've done to make it safe for us to return. And for our family, we might not be able to make that decision. These are just some of the high-level patterns we saw when we asked about educational priorities. If you remember, that question was about what are the things that are most important to you? What are you prioritizing as you think about the fall? And that could be thinking about us being on campus or not. And obviously, folks, there was a strong desire for folks to be back on campus. And our majority of early childhood families were in this this category for obvious reasons. It's so important for our youngest students to be together in the classroom with their teacher, having those social interactions, learning how to do school together, and we know that that's really hard to pull off at home. And particularly for our new families across all divisions, how do you bring them into a new community if we're starting online, which is why we're so committed to being back on campus. For some, there are tuition concerns with a design that does not have students back on campus, and those tuition concerns came from just saying it's not what I paid for. And others are that if I have to have my child at home, I also have to pay for childcare, and that calculus will not work for much longer. Social and emotional health came up over and over again, and again, it's really heartening to see that rise as a priority for the community, because it's definitely a priority for us at school. Older students, and we use the language of academic rigor here, but it ranged from just a more robust program because my child was finished at noon, to others who are looking for more challenge, to others understanding that this is a program that was well put together, and if we look to the fall, hoping for more and better. And that led to suggestions for how we could improve and needed to improve. And we just also appreciated all the thank yous and apologized for any confusion about the survey questions. We also had another question just asking about different models for being back on campus and what people could felt concerned about accommodating for your lives, and or not concerned. I'm not going to show all of the options because people were very concerned about most options that did not have students on campus for most of their time here. And the reason there wasn't a question that said, can you accommodate being on campus most of the time, is because we assumed that you could. This was the one that folks disliked the least, if I can say that. And this is where you have, part of the day on campus. But there were concerns. Excuse me, I'm sorry about this slide. This is the slide that was most concerning to, or the model that was most concerning to our folks. And that was this kind of a part of the day model, and that had to do with the fact that it would be hard to manage one child with a half-day schedule, having two in different divisions, and what if that didn't match up? So we know that is something that out of all the things we're looking at was the most hard for folks. So thinking about that, those kinds of schedules that would work or not work for folks, different things came up in terms of the comments in response to that didn't necessarily have to do with, I like this model better than another model. Just wanting us to make sure that we knew about the babysitting costs that some families were taking on in addition to tuition. And as I mentioned before, tuition in general, that the cost should be reduced if there's extended online learning next year. No matter the grade. Tension of parents, both who have to work in the home full time, can't help their children. Concern for safety, as I mentioned earlier, and a need for an online option, even if we all are back on campus in the fall. I talked about the half-day concern, and lots of suggestions that Gordon had a great opportunity to use its outdoor space to make sure that we could be on campus, and we absolutely agree on that. We had additional survey data that we could pull again to help us get a really good sense of where our community is. We surveyed students and faculty and staff as well. And so what we wanted to do was look at those three groups: parents, caregivers, students, and faculty and staff, and say, where do the needs intersect? And that would also give us a good sense of where we wanted to prioritize our work. Again, no surprise, the need to be on campus, need for the curriculum to feel meaningful and engaging. We know that some students hung in there with us, and it became hard, and a lot of the work felt busy. And again, thank you to you for your confidence in our teachers, and every question about the curriculum in terms of our surveys and especially in our interviews has also been accompanied by a deep thank you to everyone who's working hard, particularly our faculty, on making the online learning community meaningful and engaging for families. Looking for that feeling of joy, the important needs of student to student, student to teacher, and parent to parent connections. Again, social emotional health is a priority. Making sure we're looking at resources for faculty, for students, and for parents if we need to move back to online learning, and making sure that we're ready for that. But also, if we're looking at innovations in our work, we want to make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of how to make the most of the new things that we're trying to do or try. And obviously a concern for all the screen time. So one of the things that we're learning in the research is that, and it's something that we know, is that online learning should not replicate in-school learning. So whether we have an online option for students who can't be on campus or have to move into the online learning community, I just wanted to let you know and of what was guiding our thoughts about that. Gordon is a nursery through 8th grade school, and a lot of online learning models are designed for high school and college students. So we're already, you can think about it two sides of a coin. One, we're behind the 8 ball and being able to, launch something, and I'm so proud of what we were able to do with not so many resources for early childhood, elementary, and more for middle school. But the other side of that is that because there's not so much out there, we have an ability to innovate and to learn and to do new things in service to our students that are already grounded in what's good for children. So the things that we want to make sure that we're creating in our online learning community: relationships, a sense of motivation, student agency and choice, which has been a huge benefit of this, that students can kind of start their schedules and times that are right for them and do particular work at times that are right for them. That's an important thing that we don't want to lose when we come back on campus. Deep investigations, schooling as citizenship, which is just a part of who we are. So any program should foster that. And so we want to make sure, as we're looking to build up the online learning community, that we want to make it a place that feels, as I said before, meaningful, engaging, and that students feel like it's something that they want to and look forward to, even if they weren't required to do it. And I think that's an important challenge for us to take on, because ultimately it's about serving students' developmental and academic needs. So looking at those intersecting needs, and also kind of just grounding ourselves in a belief that we're never going to be a school that is going to have 40-minute Zooms from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. But we need to have a really robust educational program if we have to move into those models, or if we have to offer that model to students who can't be on campus. So our questions are looking at, obviously, the social and emotional well-being of our community. How do we maximize our time on campus, even if we aren't moving to online, but especially if we do? How might a model leverage an online learning platform? What's out there and is going to best serve our needs? How might our model foster meaningful, purposeful, joyful learning? And how might the model provide needed resources for students, for faculty and staff, and for parents? So those are going to be the guiding questions that are going to be the guiding lights for the educational program working group and the work that will happen over the summer. And we're always thinking about ways that we can pull students and parents into this work. So please absolutely let us know if there are ways that you want to be involved or things that you want to share as we engage. And I think this is pretty exciting a conversation. So I said this, and I just wanted to say it again, is just a huge, huge thank you and acknowledgement of our faculty and staff. They inspire me, and I know inspire the leadership team daily. And they are keeping your children at the front and center of everything that they are doing for Gordon School. And it's one of the biggest reasons why we've been able to come through this experience, feeling good about who we are. And I'm just eternally, eternally grateful to this group. And I hope that and believe that you are, and know that you are sharing your appreciation that you've been sharing with us on these phone calls and interviews with them. But I just encourage you to continue to do that, because they're all just rock stars and superheroes. So I wanted to talk about likely modifications, and I'm using this language purposely because I know that there are some reopening plans out there that say, you know, we're planning for if this thing happens, and then we're planning for if this thing happens and what it looks like. I'm approaching it a little differently, because our plan, as I told you, is to meet all the state and federal guidelines and make the physical modifications to be able to welcome all of our students, nursery through 8th grade, all of our students back on campus in the fall. And we're feeling confident that we can do this. Again, if we have to make programmatic changes to meet changing guidelines and whatnot, we'll be ready to do that. But our goal is to have all of our students back on campus, and I'll talk about how that's even possible with physical distancing in a second. So campus open with modifications. I call this the most likely scenario only because I'm not comparing it to different scenarios. I'm only comparing it to a scenario that would say we'll be back to campus with normal operations. I do not think that there will be and everyone that we're talking to and is advising us does not think there's any scenario where we come back to campus and it looks and feels and we operate the way that we did when we left in March. So our goal is to be open, nursery through 8, and to be open with the modifications necessary. When you see some of these modifications, I hope that'll help you understand why we felt like it was best to put our focus and energy on planning for the fall and making sure that we were ready and strong for the fall, rather than trying to do all of these things in a few weeks to be ready to open a summer camp. So we will have our screening and testing requirements in place. Testing is something that we'll need to know more about, but we definitely will have a screening mechanism where we will you'll have to be able to report that you've kind of passed a series of questions in order to be able to be on campus. And AUX actually has an app that every family would have, and every faculty and staff member would have, that would take you through those questions. It would come into us and you have a green light to be in the building. Testing, we'll have to find more about in terms of what we're able to do or not do on campus, but screening is something that will definitely be happening. Physical distancing is the big one, and we're looking at a model where we would have students operating in clusters. You might have heard pods, but that reminds me of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So I like clusters for Gordon School, And that means kind of what you've heard in terms of cohort models, where you have a small group of students who are with the same teacher or teachers, and that's who they're with all day. So that's a start, and then there are modifications off of that. Does that mean that there is one teacher that comes into classrooms to do art lessons, or are art lessons zoomed in from another room? Not ideal, but things that we need to explore and think about. But having students operate in small groups seems to be the model for reopening camps and whatnot, and we believe that that's what's going to work at Gordon. Facility zoning is talking about having areas in the school that do not have people kind of crossing over into, it limits the crossover of people in particular areas. So if you were to think about, for example, a nursery class, there would only be, for example, certain areas in the school that class would go in the building, if they were moving around the building at all. There might be limits on where different teachers can be in the building. You have particular zones that people stay in, and there may be particular zones where we allow crossover. Limiting capacity and density has to do with thinking about spaces where we're having, in the past, have had larger groups and making decisions about assemblies and large gatherings like middle school meeting, and we're fairly clear that those types of meetings will not be happening, at least in the fall, and perhaps for the entire school year. The use of PPE in a school, particularly in nursery through 8, is something that we'll have to think about, but we are pretty clear that there will be some kinds of PPE that will be required by those of us in the building and students as well. There have been questions about the youngest students and how they can accommodate and deal with masks, and that's an open question for us on the table. As summer camps get started, and some daycares especially start to open, we think that will be helpful for us to understand how they're navigating that. And if you have a cluster model where you have a group of students who are together all day and aren't having crossover with other folks, you wonder if the youngest would have to wear masks. But again, that's going to be guided by health guidelines and advice from our medical professionals. Enhanced sanitizing and cleaning, those are different things, and we have to be on top of both. And we have to also think about the schedules for those. How often does that happen, that rooms are cleaned, that blocks are cleaned? And faculty have to think about that, as well as our faculty and staff have to think about that, as well as our cleaning crews and our buildings and grounds staff. Program and schedule modifications. So if we're working in a cluster model, then we also have to think about our schedule and our program and what that accommodates during a school day. And that's the work that we'll be doing in the coming weeks to help us be able to tell you by June 30th what we think some of those modifications will be. And obviously, we also have to, a likely scenario is for us, or likely modification, excuse me, is for changes to drop off and pickup procedures and campus access for parents. And this is one of the hardest ones to have to put into place. A huge part of what makes Gordon Gordon is that we welcome our parents and our families into the school for drop off in the morning, for hanging out in the commons during the day, for being in the classrooms, with your children. That will most likely not be possible when we return. Parents will most likely have to drop off students, and students will be going into the building, and we'll obviously let you know what those procedures are. One of the great things about the building is that almost every classroom has a door to the outside. So we could facilitate again, we're confident that we could facilitate entry and an exit from the building in safe ways that honor physical distancing and our security measures. So another modification that is likely is our campus being open with an online learning option. This is not, again, like I said, the modification is not an either or. This is that we know that we'll have to open campus, and we know that we'll have to have an online learning option available for families who, for health and safety reasons, can't choose to come back when we open in the fall. We're calling this a hybrid model. Other schools have used that language to kind of talk about in school one week and out of school another. We're not using that way. We're talking about we have an in-person program, and we also have an online learning option that's available for students who can't be with us. And so it's important to know that Zooming or Skyping a student into a classroom is not a viable option for robust learning. There are ways to use Zoom and other platforms to have children connected live into classrooms, but just kind of turning on a Zoom when there's a live classroom and having a child sit at a laptop, it doesn't work. If you've ever been at a meeting where there are folks in the room having a live meeting and you're Zooming in, it's a very frustrating experience. So thinking about what the platforms will be in order to create a robust and substantive program for children who need to stay home is an important part of the planning ahead. And then we need to be prepared for what we're calling toggling. So what other folks might be calling the hybrid, we just need to be ready that there could be, and we should expect moments that we will be on campus, and then we might be ordered to close campus for a short or an extended period of time for health and safety reasons. And we just have to be able to move nimbly into our online learning community if that happens. And again, it's just a part of our planning process. So reasons we're optimistic about a plan to have all of our children back on campus together. So we are a school founded by a pediatrician. A doctor is the founder of our school, an MD, not a fake doctor like me, but someone who really thought about the developmental well-being of children, but also what works best from a health perspective. And we were founded as an open-air school, a school where you kept the windows open to ensure and facilitate good health. So we have windows and doors in our classrooms, but we also just have a dedication to a fact-based, science-driven approach to learning and living on our campus. It's who we are. We also have to thank a former board chair, Otto Hoffer, who discovered our campus picking mushrooms, and that was a faculty trivia question not too long ago. But we have an amazing 12-acre campus. We have a commitment to outdoor education and leveraging these spaces, whether it be the ponds and the fields, just in terms of lessons that teachers have, which we've already been doing, but it also gives us flexibility if we do have to have some modified structures for classrooms to happen outside, or put up tents outside to have classes that would help us with any physical distancing measures. So we have many more options about what we can do to make sure we're meeting all of the guidelines, because we don't only have the space to do it, but we just have the commitment and the expertise to using the outdoors already to our advantage. And also Bill Warner, we have to thank for the building that we're in right now and the design of that building. It is a building that accommodates 450 students and 3 sections per grade. So breaking into 3 cohorts for us, or 3 clusters for us, for a grade does not require us to build another building or take our children off campus. It does. We have the space to do it safely, and to have the children in rooms that are classrooms, and that's something that has us very excited and confident in our plan ahead. I talked about the classroom, the school, the doors to the outside. Bathrooms in our early childhood classrooms, because bathrooms, if there is something that we're going to need to keep an eye on, it's our bathrooms and the traffic in there and how children are using them. In our health and hygiene protocols are going to be calling for more hand washing. So we're lucky to already have rooms that have sinks and bathrooms inside the room to limit movement around the building. And like I said, the spaces serve the developmental needs of our children, and we've already been committed to keeping our community safe. The design of our building has so much to do with that. So we feel really good about what's possible. If I have to say there are things that we're crossing our fingers about or worried about, it's that we are ready to meet all of the health and safety guidelines and make necessary modifications, which is our commitment. But we cannot get the supplies that we need. So I'm sure some of your businesses are facing this too. How do you get all the things that that you need? But we've already started now sourcing that, and Ox has been helpful with that, as has Nurse Sandy and folks from the board. And so we have lots of different, where we may have had a limited list when we operated normally, we have to expand that list and do thorough research to make sure that we have everything that we need when we need it. And then, as I said before, a state mandated order to close campus would be extremely, extremely disappointing, particularly if we are ready to go for the fall. Some folks have asked, as an independent school, do we have to follow a state mandate? So there are different, orders that we might get. So there's some decisions for snow days, for example, that the Providence public schools could make to close, and we usually just, out of our normal way of operating, follow what they're doing. But we could choose to remain open as an independent school. It depends on the order that we get, and we have gotten the order that we got to close campus this year was, a very clear email that said this applies to independent schools too. So the answer to the question of can independent schools go their own way? It depends on what the state and the governor tells us. All right, another pause. See if I can answer any questions.
Okay, we have a few.
Great.
Going back a little bit, will parent comfort about returning to school be assessed later in the summer? And if so, how will the results of that assessment influence any planning later in the summer?
So our plan, as I said, is to be open. And if we have a higher number of families who've said that they don't feel comfortable coming back to campus, then we will be ready to provide an online learning option. One that has not been designed yet, but that we have some of the seeds of in the work that we're doing in the online learning community. So our hope is that once that is designed, folks would be able to see it before they were making decisions. But our hope is that as many families as possible can be on campus, and that we would have that you would know before August, obviously, what our plans are for students who have to be in the hybrid model. It would not be a case of us saying we're going to, I'm not saying the questioner is asking this, but not open campus because we have so many kids who won't be here. We feel confident that we would have enough families on campus based on the conversations that we've had. And I have to think that if there were a high number of families that saying they weren't going to come because of safety concerns, then something has kind of shifted more either globally or locally that we would have to think about as a school. So we have to be flexible, but I don't see a rise in numbers of families who decide that they can't be on campus stopping us from the plan the outlines of the plan that I've laid out.
Okay. Second question, has the school considered organizing families into pods, families in neighborhoods, families in grades, in case they need to go back into an online learning situation? A group of families outside of the school that do work together and assist each other with childcare and, online learning, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love this idea. And I think that this is going to be a really important moment for just partnership with our families and thinking about how the cluster model is working at school, and then how comfortable families may feel about those children who have been, in school together, working together in the same space together, then being able to have smaller groups of them, working together to support families who can't support their children with online learning. So yes, it's something that I actually like a lot, particularly knowing how stressful the experience has been for families trying to do a lot of support, particularly for the younger students in the home, and also work a full work day.
Okay, I think you've answered this already. That there will be an online option for families that may choose to be out, but I'm also seeing here just now in the chat, is it possible that more than, yes or no will be offered? Is there going to be a possibility that a student might be on campus 2 days a week and working from home 3 days a week? Or is it going to be either you're doing online or you're going to be on campus?
Yeah, I think we'd have to understand more about that situation and why a family was making that choice. So I'm not going to we're putting everything on the table, but I just want to know more about a particular situation and how we could support a family that needed to choose that after understanding more about why.
Will all staff and children be tested before returning to school in the fall? And when there is a vaccine, will it be required?
So I can't answer questions about testing because at this point, unclear on what the process will be for all schools that are opening and how testing will be a part of that process. So if it's our hope is that testing would be widely available, easy for families to do, and be able to share with us. But I can't answer that particular question right now. But as you saw in the presentation, the testing is on the table for us to figure out how that plays into our screening process and protocols. There was a second part to that question?
Just when there is a vaccine, will it be required? Which could be a year or more from now.
Right. I am hopeful that the laws will change in terms of vaccinations. If they do not change right now, even as an independent school, and we've checked with our school council on this, we could not make that decision to make it mandatory. So I'm hoping that will be that given what we're going through, that there will be some revisiting of that law.
Has the administration been thinking about middle school clusters being based on interests and electives? Having kids make that choice, once they get to middle school, choosing is such an important part of it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so it's like, could there be a handbell cluster and a math camp cluster, that
Right.
kind of thing?
Love that. So not specifically that idea, but if you think back to what I was talking about in terms of the futures thinking for the educational program. As an example, our faculty and staff had the opportunity to work with one of our parents, Betsy Stubblefield, and Jen Silbert, who worked with us on our strategic visioning process, and really started this process of designing our school of the future. And really everything was on the table, and the things that faculty were coming up with in terms of their hopes and designs and schemes, if you will, for our school. I don't think anything is off the table, because one of the big things that has come up in this is that there really is something important about students having long, deep time to pursue the things that they care about, and to do it with people who care about the same things. So what are the spaces that we can create in the school to do that, while making sure that we're aligning with the health and safety protocols that we need to align with? So nothing is off the table, and it's a great idea for us to play around with.
Okay. If the school is online for fall and having a child that we feel is too young for online learning, preschool student, can we defer our enrollment or take a pause?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're thinking about some financial things right now. And I hope that will be helpful. It won't answer that specific question about deferring enrollment or not. That's not something that we have put on the table. But I'll talk a little bit about what we are thinking about as possible, and I'll kind of note that as a question that we'll want to dig into in in one of our working groups.
And somebody else is also asking about how you're saying how important cross-grade connections are, and is hopeful that the school is thinking about ways to maintain cross-grade and cross-school connections, even while maintaining the social distancing and perhaps the clustering that will be necessary.
Right. I believe that we are, because if you think about the kind of cluster model, there are ways to think about what those clusters are differently for particular classes. So if we are thinking about a cluster that's, and I'm totally making this up, it has not been planned, it's just an example, a literature culture, a cluster for middle school, who could be in that, and for how long. The whole idea of a cluster is that it's a group that's stable and stays together over time, and limits who's coming in and out to limit spread or transfer. So it's it's something that we could think about doing. We just have to make sure it aligns with kind of the whole point of the cluster. And hoping the evolution of the virus and the ways that we are forced to respond to it in order to stay safe evolve as well. Again, have we thought about mixed grade combinations and how important they are? Absolutely. And how would we pull that off with a cluster model? Again, something to consider. But we do know the importance of having different grades, particularly in the middle school, being able to cross-pollinate, if you will.
And there's been a few questions in the chat about how we'll be supporting the emotional needs of kids coming back after such a long hiatus, especially the younger children, and dealing with separation anxiety, that kind of thing. If there's any plans in place for that.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be, I think, one of the most important parts of how we think about every aspect of our educational, not only our educational program, but all the things we're thinking about, right? Because if you're thinking about drop-off changing, and you're thinking about entry into the building changing, if you're thinking about masks, all of those are things that can play into anxiety for children, no matter the age. And it's not an overstatement to say that we have children and families who are have been traumatized by this experience. And so we really do want to have a trauma-informed approach to everything that we're doing. Judith Nyes is an important part of that conversation and the work that we're doing, and will be brought into the health and safety and wellness conversation, obviously the educational program conversation as well. And we need to make sure that we're giving our faculty and staff the resources that they will need in order to be ready to support students who are having a rough time now, and will have a rough time transitioning back to campus too. So that's a piece of the work that we don't take lightly, and is actually a top priority, as I shared at the beginning about the well-being of our students in our community. All right, Claire, I'm going to move on, and we'll have one more Q&A to end, and this is a little shorter, so here we go. Wanted to end by just talking a little bit about financial viability, as this came up a lot in the surveys around tuition, and also just want you to know the kinds of things that the school needs to think about and take care of to make sure that we are make it through this crisis and aren't kind of crawling through it, but thriving through it and stronger at the end of it. And that will require just really thoughtful planning and work. So we asked a question about how the crisis is impacting, or how families anticipated it will impact your finances. And we asked about within 4 months of when we put the survey out, and that's the yellow bar, and then asked about 12 to 18 months, and that's the green bar. And as you can see, we have families that don't foresee their finances changing, and that is a big group. And then we have a very big group of folks who say it's too early to tell. So what that tells us is that uncertainty on the too early to tell is something that we're really going to have to keep an eye on, and make sure that we're ready to withstand things that may come our way, because sadly, that families are experiencing furloughs, changes in income, and changes in expectations of income that they believe that they were going to have. So I really appreciate this this question, because it gives us a kind of a sense of the next 12 to 18 months are going to be crucial, and those are the times that folks are worried about, and we need to make sure we have a plan for that period. So I just wanted to go back a little bit before COVID-19 and let you know that the leadership team and the board were looking at different aspects of our financial model before this even went down, to make sure that we were operating in a financially sustainable way. Looking out 3 to 5 years, what were the things that we're going to have to do around these 3 areas: managing our expenses, attracting additional revenue, and growing our fundraising. So we put a plan in place and presented that to the board that was approved. So we have already moved on some of the things to make sure our budget would be sound before this crisis began. We did have to put a 2-year salary freeze in place, which is hard. But that forward thinking has meant that we don't need to, right now, look at other hard pieces of our our budget to cut in the midst of this crisis. So just appreciative to Tom and the leadership team and the board for that forward thinking, that we were making some sound decisions that have put us in a better position to withstand this storm right now. Folks have been curious if Gordon is a school that received a loan through the Paycheck Protection Program, and we are, and received a loan in the amount of $1.1 million, and also thankfully fully expect that it will be forgiven under the terms of the program, because we're using those funds as they were intended. To cover all of our faculty and staff salaries and other payroll related expenses through June. We do get savings through having received the loan, and it does provide some short-term relief from us, for us, which gives us some breathing room as we kind of navigate these choppy waters. But it's not enough to mitigate all of the challenges that we expect to face ahead. That includes families, as I said, who have uncertain financial circumstances and may not be able to meet their FIT price. Families who have to move because of a job loss or changes that their employers are making because of this crisis, which could affect enrollment. Our reduction in revenue from rentals and auxiliary programs. The market volatility and that impact on our endowment. And also the increased facility and staffing costs related to opening campus safely. A cluster model could have could mean that we have a need for hiring more staff. Maybe not, but it could. And we know that we're going to have a facility expenses that would not have been in our budget in a normal a school year. And given that the plan is still in process, not sure what all of those expenses will be. And then there's just the stuff you don't know about. So one of the ways that we want to mitigate some of these challenges is through fundraising and through the generosity of our community. And again, thank you to our community who has been so generous in time that you've given to us through your wisdom, advice, through volunteering and Compassionate, which has been connecting families and taking care of families and acknowledging faculty and staff, and through gifts to the school. And for folks who are able to do that now within our community, it's been really an important part of why we've been able to get through this crisis this year. But we will need more. And the Compassionate Community Fund is established to provide immediate and targeted support to those in need in the Gordon community who've been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. And so that means support for families who may have a period where they're having trouble paying tuition, meeting facility-related health and safety expenses for the fall. I talked about that. And also a fund for me, for the head of school, as unexpected needs come up for faculty, for staff, for students, being able to respond quickly and flexibly with a fund like that, I think will be important given the unexpected and uncertain way all of this is working right now. So the thing that I want to say about this fund is that we want the entire Gordon community to know about it. And if you are moved and have the ability to give, and you are a current family, we welcome that and deeply, deeply appreciate it. But we know that the pressures, and you saw from that chart that said too early to tell, that families that may have been able to make the decision to do this, to make a gift in the past, can't make that decision right now. So our efforts are really going to be targeted to our wider Gordon friends. That could be former parents, former trustees, friends of the school, grand friends, folks who are blessed right now to not be deeply financially impacted by this crisis right now, who love Gordon School and have the capacity to make significant gifts. So again, a lot of that fundraising will be quiet, because we're not going to lean too heavily on our current community to build the fund, but absolutely welcome and deeply appreciate anyone who's able and willing to give. Another update that just wanted you to know as an FYI, for our families who were at Gordon when we were in a financial aid model and transitioned into a FIT. You are due for your reevaluation this spring. That means we get all of the your tax forms and financial information and start to reassess your price for your next cycle. And just want the community to know that due to the filing extension, the federal extension to July 15th, we've adjusted our schedule to reach out for those materials and begin that process this fall. And this is the last thing I wanted to address. It doesn't address the question about deferring enrollment. As I said, that's a conversation that I just want to bring back, to our finance working group and talk about the implications of a decision like that. We do, do not do deferments currently, and would like to look for other ways to think about acknowledging the inconvenience, to say the least, of what it would mean to move to an extended online learning model. And a lot of questions came up in the survey of whether the school is considering that or not. And the question is, yes, we are seriously considering per diem tuition credits, credits based on number of days that we're off campus if campus needs to be closed and moved into online learning, and the financial implications of doing that, and want to seriously consider ways that we could make that happen. We have to just answer some questions as we do some modeling. What would be the amount of that credit? We would look at it by the day, but would we be able to credit the full day, or would it need to be a percentage of that? We'd need to think about who would receive those credits. Again, thinking about the whole school has a pretty serious implication for our ability to keep operating. So we need to be thoughtful about that, and know that while every child needs and wants, and I'm sure every family in a normal circumstance would want their family to be here and is impacted by the fact that we are online full time now, we also know that our youngest students in early childhood, whose learning day and a play-based curriculum that's so based on the social interactions with their classmates and teachers, we need to think seriously about early childhood and if they would be prioritized for credits. And just need to know under what circumstances. So when we say an extended period of online learning, is that 2 days, 10 days, a month? Again, we need to drill down on that so that we can be as clear and as equitable as possible as we think about that, while at the same time making sure, as I said, that we're paying attention to the financial sustainability of the school. So you will have that answer by June 30th, and that, as I shared earlier, is the date by which we're planning to have many of the open questions here that we're planning for answered for you and your family. Last Q&A.
I'm only seeing one. Oh, I've got a few here then. I think you answered this question. I was busy working on the chat. Will FIT prices, not necessarily for people who are being reevaluated now, but will FIT prices be reevaluated earlier than the 3-year cycle?
Right now, we do not have plans to do that. So for families who are experiencing financial trouble and worried about their ability to pay, we are encouraging you right now to speak with Tom in the business office to talk about what the possibilities are. And I saw some people in our survey saying, well, this certain thing is I know this is the thing that I'm going to be told, and that's not going to work for me. And I just want to encourage you to not make that assumption, because for us, thinking about supporting families through a short-term crisis is an investment for us. The reason, and we want to do everything we can to support families through a short-term period of financial uncertainty. The reason that we don't want to mess around with FIT prices is because making that kind of structural change to our budget could really negatively impact the long-term financial sustainability of the school. So I'm really happy that we have the model that we do, because schools, many other schools who have financial aid right now, are making very understandable decisions about increasing emergency aid for families. What that means, though, is that down the road, it is unlikely that that family will stop needing that aid, or it's unlikely the school will go back to that family even if they don't need that aid and say, okay, we're taking that back. So we have to work with you all and make sure that you can be at Gordon and stay at Gordon, and that your children will graduate from Gordon. And we feel like through working with you now for this fall, and through building a robust community a crisis fund, then we're confident that we can do the work that needs to be done for most of our families to help you get through this time. But we need to hear from you, and don't make assumptions about what's possible or not possible. I can't wave a magic wand and make all dreams come true. Tom can't either, but we want to know, we want to be creative, and we want to be honest with you about what will work and not work.
Can you talk about Gators and YAP for days when a student is on campus? Are we expecting to have Gators and YAP available until 5:30?
So those are some of the questions that fall under the program and schedule modifications that we'll need to look at. Gators is challenging, and I'm not predicting anything. I'm just letting you know what one of our big questions is because Gators is a mixed group of children from different grades in the morning, early morning, and in the afternoon. And I know that they're in different sections and whatnot. But if we're working with a cluster model, we just need to think about how that translates into our programs that serve different grades.
And I think that is everything.
Awesome. So I'm just going to end by thanking you all once more, number one, for coming tonight, but more importantly, just all of the support, encouragement, and feedback that you've given to us throughout this. We miss you so much. We miss seeing you every day. We're looking forward to our end of the year drive-throughs, and absolutely looking forward to our commencement with the class of 2020. And I hope that I made clear tonight our commitment to being back together in the fall, and look forward to giving you more answers about what that will look like in the coming weeks. So thank you for coming tonight. I think we're going to try to unspotlight me and unmute everyone, at least for you to say goodbye, and see folks, if you're in gallery view, to see all the folks that are here tonight. And I'm looking forward to that as well. So thank you, everyone. You're unmuted. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good to see you.
Good to see everybody.
Have a good night.
Especially the baby.
Yes.
I
Carter and
love the
Lucy,
long
thank
hair.
you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bernstein.
Thank you so much, everyone.
This is the best city ever.
Everybody good? I love seeing these faces. Good night.
You're all pulling off the long hair.
Thank you, Noni.
Thank you.
I want to see the dog.
Hi, Josh and Xavier.
Oh, hi, Marlon and Cindy.
So many faces.
I know. Carter and Lucy, thank you for coming.
There's Miss Celeste. You want to say hi to Miss Celeste? Say goodnight, Miss Celeste.
Good night, Miss Les.
Oh my goodness.
Oliver.
Good night, Beans. Good to see you, Beans. Karen and Michael, hi. Hi, Amra.
Hi, Santana.
I see Rosie and Henry. Hi, Rosie and Henry.
Awesome now.
Good night, everyone.
Wow. Can't wait for the fall to see people in person.
Hi, everybody.
We can't. Oh, I saw Morgan.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.